everyone. I'm Peg Rounds, Isabella Canter in the SCA. In 2008, I wanted to enjoy making some crafts, and it led me to working as a designer, tutorial writer, and teacher for the craft industry for 10 years. It just kind of went from there. I retired from doing that about 2 years ago, and then after that, I found that I love jewelry making. Well, I had already been doing Kumihimo for about 7 years, and I've competed in local fairs. I've sold at a local gallery. And then 2 years ago, my husband, son, and I went to a Renaissance fair where we saw the local SCA group set up, and we're like, you know, that's kind of cool. And my son really took a liking in it, kept researching it after we came home and researching it. And we decided, he kept talking to my husband and I about it. And we decided, let's go check out the local group. Well, we were head over heels for it and just absolutely loved the group and everybody in it. So we became members of Dark River about 2 years ago. And we're part of the Middle Kingdom. And I am currently the MOAS deputy for Dark River. So, like I said, my love for Kumihimo has been for 7 years. So I've collected a lot of information, and just, I've gone from doing just basic braids to doing beaded braids. And then it kind of led me back once we joined the SCA to those basic braids and what you could do with them. And I became more and more interested and thought, you know, this would be fun to do as a class. So I talked with our MOAS in the local group, and she said, sure. She said, let's do it. So I was allowed to teach at our first event just back in February, right before everything shut down. And that was the first class I got to teach in the SCA. So I'm still pretty excited over it. But with it, you have a maru dye. But maru dyes are actually post-SCA era. But there have been in some research that I've done, there have been evidence of it actually in the European countries where something along the maru dye style had existed. So in Japan, they were using the maru dye, but it was past the SCA time period. But then Makiko Tada, who's a very sweet person, she brought over to the US a disc, which allowed us to transport everything just simply by putting it on here. And you'll find discs in different sizes. I mean, you've got the big ones. I've got thick ones. If you can't tell, I love to work with different discs. You can even find them in square style, which is going to be a class that I am working on currently to also teach later on. So keep a lookout for that. If you take my class, you would get just a small round disc with all the supplies to allow you to do the braid that we will be working on tonight. In my handout, I have included the list of sources that I like to buy from. But if you don't want to maybe necessarily right now get a round disc, you can always make one out of cardboard. I have included the instructions for that in my handout as well. So once you have your disc, then you need fiber. Okay, this is a big question I've heard a lot of people ask and had a lot of people ask me. What type of fiber do I use? You can use yarn, but it's not the best choice because yarn will stretch. After a while, your weave will stretch out of shape. Well, you don't want to spend hours on something that after a while is just going to wear out. So I'm not a big fan of yarn, but even if you want to begin with it, that's a great choice to start with. It's reasonable. There's also things like embroidery thread and sewing threads, but there's also the fact that as you wear those, if you were to sew them on like a piece of garb, after a while, they would wear thin and snap. Then again, you're minus even part of your garb. Well, you don't want to spend hours again doing that and then have it break on you. There is cording, and I've got it here. This is a beaded piece that I'm currently working on. And there's thread called S-Lon and C-Lon, which can be purchased at many different sites online. You can find it at some of the craft stores even. And these are great if you're working with beads, because as your beads move up and down on it, it's not going to wear thin. It's not going to, if there's a sharp edge on the bead, it's not going to break it through. So you can choose C-Lon if you're working with beads. There's also Satin Cord, which is also known as rat tail cord. Let's see if we can get that up there. That's a good choice. It makes a thick braid if you want something really thick, but it's also really tough. It's not going to break as easy. And it comes in different colors, but its biggest drawback that I find, especially for if you're looking for something era appropriate, is that it has a shine to it. You don't want a garb necessarily that has a shine, which is understandable. So maybe that's not the choice that you want either. One of my favorite things that I use is Impostor Thread. And you can see this is what Impostor Thread looks like braided. And this one I've used this for demonstrations. So it's got several different weaves gathered in it. And as well, it comes in many different colors. And I absolutely love it. It's the closest to silk without spending the price on silk that you can get. Let's see if we can get my camera focused here. There we go. But that is Impostor Thread. And each thread, this is what a package of it looks like. And it comes in 105 inches long, which gives you a very nice long braid. And there are 39 threads to each bundle in a package. So you would use one whole bundle into one slot of your disc. Or if you're doing a maru dye and using tama, you would put one bundle per tama on it. These braids that I just showed you and shared with you were all done on a maru dye. And you can see the different bundles as it was woven together. And it makes a thicker braid. I have researched, and without using Impostor Thread and substituting it for silk, I have researched what are some other things that you could use that might go along more era appropriate. Well, in my research, I found something that was most common in a lot of parts of the world was hemp. And this would be, if you took my class, this would be something else you would find in your kit. You would also receive the disc, bobbins, and a piece of small green yarn. And we'll show you what to do with those tonight so that you can make your own. But I really like hemp. As you can also use, you'll need bobbins for sure for this braid because it likes to tangle upon itself. This is one style of bobbin you will often find, and they come in smaller sizes. Some of them have weights on the back. I like those more so for if I'm working on a beaded piece. But I have found a very good, cost-effective substitution for those. Hair curlers. You can get them for $16 for, I think it's 80 in a package from Amazon. And that's what you would find in your class kits, would be simple hair curlers. They work the same. They even, if you notice, it's kind of fun, they open up the same even. So they're a lot cheaper. And I used to always buy the bobbins that everybody said for Kumihimo. Once I discovered these, I thought, I'm just going to start buying those, because usually I have a bunch of projects on different discs, and a lot of times they're either already used or I just can't find where I had stashed them for the day. This is a lot easier to find, and I have like 80 to a package. So I have more than usual than what I have for projects just to use these. So this is one thing I like, and it was a very good learning experience. And they're easy. I mean, just simply, they have like a little rubbery stickiness to them. So your thread and even your hemp especially likes to stick to it. So it's not pulling off as you're working down your braid like you find often with the other bobbins. But it would be your choice, whatever you would like to use. But this is a good alternative if you're looking for something that is cost effective and you get a lot of, so you can do more braids, because who's got one project at a time on their discs? So does anybody have any questions currently?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have links to the Impostor Thread? Is that also on your handout?
I don't think I included those, but I can get those to you. I'll post them in the event page on Facebook, and that way you have them. If you look online for a company called Braider's Hand, and I know the owners there, they're really good about shipping things out, especially currently. That's a very good place to get it from. And I want to say it's like $5 to $6 to $8, depending on what you choose per package. They have some which is metallic threads, which run more about $14. So it just depends on what you choose. But Braider's Hand is a good source for that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anyone else have any?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Are any other than the hemp, are any of the threads you were talking about natural threads? I have allergies to just about anything synthetic.
Well, I haven't actually researched that far, but I'm sure there would be other stuff out there. I know even people use wire. If you look at my disc here, if you notice, I have written on it the word thick. That one I usually dedicate to thicker cords, but I didn't have a disc available at the time, so I use that one. I have one that I use specifically for wire, so maybe wire would be a choice for you.
Oh, well, actually, I was wondering if the other threads you were talking about, some of which I was familiar with, some of which I hadn't seen before, if any of those happen to be non-synthetic other than hemp.
For the natural threads, I haven't really looked at it, but I can look more into it. S-Lon and C-Lon, I believe, would be more of a synthetic thread. The Satin Cord would be synthetic because that is mass produced. Impostor Thread, I don't know for sure, but I can talk to the owners of Braider's Hand and see what they say about it. And hemp is the only other thing that I've really used that's not synthetic wise for braids, because usually I have been doing most recently beaded braids, so I use the thicker S-Lon and C-Lon. But I can get back to you on that, and I'll post those answers as soon as I have the information in the discussion for the event page.
Okay. Yeah, I'm addicted to some of the stuff you said wouldn't be good because it stretches. I have a boatload of cotton. I have a boatload of 2 different types of silk.
The silk, natural silk would be fine to use as long as you don't have an allergy to it. And I do know that you can get some natural silk from Braider's Hand. It's a little bit.
Well, I have a very good friend who sells my braids for me. I don't think Megan would be happy.
Okay. So, but yeah, you can get, you know, the natural silk would be, and it looks like, it pretty much looks like the imposter thread in braiding it. So, you know, it would be a close alternative.
It makes lovely braids.
It does. It really does. And I like that it gives just that little bit of texture to it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to rob you of so much class time.
Oh, no, that's okay. So we're doing fine on time. So if you do, anybody does have questions, just let me know and I will be sure to answer them. Or if I'm not sure of the answer, I'll check it out and get back to you on it. So right now I am going to switch my cameras and we are going to start braiding. Actually, you know what? We're not going to switch cameras yet. We're going to do it this way. In my class kit, you would receive 4 pieces of hemp. And I like to do a no knot start. That way you don't have your unfinished ends at the end of your braid. You can always start that way and just tie those in a knot and then put your 4 pieces into your slots. But I like to use an end that is not as loose and it's more finished, and it's a good way to put on like your end caps if you're going to make a jewelry piece. So I use 4 40-inch cords, which will make a 20-inch braid. And in my class notes, I have given you a couple different formulas of how to figure out if you want different sized braids in that. And I'll just let you read those from the notes so that we can focus on this tonight and the no knot start. I've also included some different things for finishing your braid in my notes too, which I'll just let you guys look at as well. So if you were in my class, or if you're following along tonight and doing one, you want 4 40-inch pieces, and you want to fold those in half. At the top where it's folded, then I would include it in your kit would be a piece of yarn. You want to use a slip knot so that you can remove that piece when you're finished. So you would fold your yarn in half, stick it through the top of your braid where it's folded at the top, and then with that little opening that you have, you'd slip your end through, and there, you're ready. And that will be the center of your braid, and it will also be the part that will go down the center of your disc. So and I like to, as I work, I like to hold it because it keeps it from pulling it back up. For some braids, you would use a weight, but for this braid, I tried a weight on it, and it totally goofed up the tension on the braid, and the braid did not look like what it should. So I quickly realized that that braid was one that would not have a weight to it. So to keep it from sliding, because even once you get it in your slots, if you have a disc you've used a little bit, it will slide around a little bit, and that will throw your tension off. So I like to just use this little piece here, since you have it anyways, to hold on to, and it keeps your braid pulled through. But then you would, after you have that done, you would put each of your pieces in your corresponding slots, which for the braid we're doing tonight would be, your starting point would be at 8 and 7. Well, it would actually be 32 and 1, 7 and 8, 16 and 17, and 24 and 25 on your disc is where you would start, north, south, east, and west. So now I will switch my cameras and we'll get to work on making that braid. And this is what your braid will look like as you move along and as it's finished. Isn't that pretty? Real flat braid, perfect for like trim work around garb. Let's see here. There we go. A little bit better. And I chose a kind of a brown and yellow hemp for this braid, just so that it was easy to see. But there's a lot of different choices of even hemp colors. And I found some of them are naturally dyed that you can use. So with your first move, and when you're working on these braids, you want to work all the way through your steps. For this braid, there are 10 steps. Before you stop and lay that braid down, you want to stop at that 10th step, because especially from experience, if you get interrupted or you have to lay that braid down and it's a while before you get back to it, you're going to pick that up and say, okay, what step was I on? And then you're going to have to sit and kind of rework it. So it's just easiest before, and I suggest this with any braid you're making, work through your last step so that when you know to pick up that disc again, you're working from step one. It's a lot easier than having to try to figure it out and spend most of the time that you get working on your braid trying to figure out where you left off. So in your class notes, you will have a paper that will look similar to that. And once you have your disc loaded, you will start with the number 8, and you will move it up over to number 7. You've now done your first move. Let's see here. Let's see if I move this lighting here, if that'll help a little bit here. Okay, let's try to find the best that you guys can see it. There, that's a little better, I guess. In that first step, you actually have 2 steps that you do before you move on to step 2. You've moved your first one from 8 to 7. Your second move would be from 24 to 23. Then you can move on to your second step, and that would be 32 to 8. 16 then moves back up to 24. And if you've noticed, you filled in where you've already moved some of your pieces. From 16 to 24 move, then you go to step 4, and it's 7 to 16. So now you're back going to your original positions on your braid for your first part. To get back to where you originally started with the braid so that everything looks the same, you will need to do the moves, steps 1 through 10, twice before you have actually completed one whole step of the braid. So okay, our last move here. And here's a good thing. If you aren't sure which was your last step you moved, you can look to see what is your top piece that's on the very top of all of your braid in the center, so that you know, okay, that was moved down to number 16. So then you can look back onto your pattern sheet and say, okay, it was number 16. Oh, okay, I moved from 7 to 16. So my next step then is to move 23 up to 32. See how easy that was to figure out if you do get lost? A lot of times, that's one of the hardest things that people get so frustrated with, and they don't continue with Kumihimo because they get lost. It's very easy to find where you've left off on just your move if you look at your very top piece. Otherwise, you will be able to just look at it and say, okay, and then go right back to your pattern sheet, see where that last number was, and then go back and start your next moves again. So then we move 9 to 10, which we would move from here down. 25 to 26, you move up. Now you're starting that second rotation to get you back to where you started. Move number 1 down to your 25. 17 goes up to 9. 10 to number 1. And see, you've got your colors pretty much, since I had set my disc up so that the colors were all next to each other, you've almost got your colors matched again. As I work, I like to, especially with the hemp, it will roll out a little bit. I like to push it in towards the center. That way then it keeps the braid as it comes out below, it keeps it tight and a narrow width. If you notice at the top, it looks wide, and that's just because of the way it's pushed into the disc. But if I let these roll out too far, then you're going to see down here your braid starting to get pretty loose and pretty sloppy looking. And you want all of your stitches to remain the same, especially along your edges in this braid. And a good way to help with that is to just roll those in and give those just a little push so that they're rolled in together. Your next move then will be, let's see, oh, I did it again, 10 to 1. Okay, there we go. And this will be step 10. You will take 26 and move it down to 17. And you've gotten one whole move on your braid. And as you work down, you can see where, you know, it's added just a little bit more section to that braid. And I love being able to go back and say, oh, you know what? I've done this in just this short amount of time. It's kind of fun to watch your braid as it develops. So then you just keep repeating those moves. And in the beginning, like I said, I like to hold it here. As the braid lengthens, I move it up and just hold it just lightly between my fingers because it keeps it pulled down a little bit. You can see if I let go of it, it pops it up a little bit here. If you hold it a little bit between your fingers too, it also helps to keep your working surface more taut and they don't roll as much. So you're ready for your next time then. Your next step to add more to your braid. You would move, again, your 8 to your 7 and your 24 to your 23. 32 would come down then to your number 8 slot. 16 would go over and, oops, I didn't move that 24 there. So, 16 to 24. I have one that shouldn't be moved here. There we go. 16 up to your 24. 7 to 16. You see, that's, if you can see, these like to swing around each other. That's one good reason to why I have some type of bobbin on the end. Because could you imagine having all your cording getting tangled and trying to move it? That would just virtually be impossible. You'd be spending a lot of time untangling your cords just to make a move. So I would highly suggest putting bobbins on. So we're up to 23 to 32. Your 9 to your 10. As you work too, you don't necessarily want to have your braid laying on your table or even in your lap, because that will affect the tension of your braid. Anything, right now, when you work with Kumihimo and working with it up in the air, you're using gravity to help maintain your entire braid tension. And if you have it laying down, you're pushing all of that material back up, so the tensioning is off. That's one thing with Kumihimo is you will find that any little movement on tension will often cause a more noticeable movement in your braid. And if you want something, you know, that you're working really hard on, you really don't necessarily want that. As I had mentioned earlier, I used a weight, a counterweight on a braid. And for counterweights, you can use anything from pennies in a bag to even scientific weights. They make little weights that a lot of the craft stores sell. And you can just play with the grams of weight that you want on a braid and see which tension works best for you. I had, for the fun of it, I wanted to see what a weight would do to this braid. So I added some weight to it, and you can see I had started out looking just fine. And then when I added that weight, it got really loose in some areas and really tight in other areas. See here? There we go. That's a pretty good shot of it. And that way, you don't want a sloppy looking braid. So I found the best thing to do was to remove a weight altogether for this braid. So with this particular braid, I would not recommend any form of weight. But if you want and are working on another braid and you just want to play with it, I have fun doing that. And that's okay. It just depends on what you want it to look like. But you do want to make sure that your braid weaving isn't getting too loose. Otherwise, with this one, it comes out to be pretty sloppy braid and it doesn't even want to lay flat. So it was a fun learning experience when I did that. Does anyone have any questions yet?
I definitely am going to send you a friend request because I'll think of a million things.
That's fine. Anybody who would like to send me a friend's request or send me a message if they have any questions or just, you know, any ideas or anything, feel free to do that. I'm on Facebook under Peg Rounds. I also have my SCA name in my profile, so it's easy to find. In my profile picture, look for someone in a blue vest. I have my garb on in my picture. So I know there's several Peg Rounds on there, but that's the one you're looking for. But feel free. I love to talk Kumihimo with anybody and everybody. So it's something, like I said, I have just fallen in love with and love to do. So what does everybody think so far of this braid? Do you have any ideas of what maybe you might like to use a braid like this with?
I was actually thinking about using this style to do some Victorian hair jewelry.
Oh, that would be perfect. Sure. Be able to wrap it around and you could finish off the ends really easy.
Yeah.
Of some ladies who like to do the flat braids and they glue them to headbands, just plain headbands, and wear them that way. And that was one thing I was always going to do, but I have yet to do that.
When I got into steampunk stuff, I decided to try making my own hair rats because my hair was pretty long. And so I got in the habit of saving my shed hair, kind of like the Victorian ladies did. I don't have a pretty little dish to stuff it in, but I thought that's an interesting art form. And this seems very much like the same thing because the style that I saw from, I don't know, some late 19th century magazine was essentially the same as this little wheel. It was like a little cardboard dial with little slots cut into it, and then all of the different things hanging off with little bobbin weights on them.
Mhm.
So,
And do you know what era been about?
it, definitely Victorian.
Victorian?
They had some interesting ideas. A lot of the times it would be for the jewelry would actually be made from the hair of a deceased loved one, but sometimes they would also, cut a lock of their own and make it for their sweetheart. But I've also seen like embroidery projects made with it too, where they use it as the thread essentially. Maybe a few hairs at a time, because that would be very fine thread, but
Yes, it would. That would almost be kind of along the line of what imposter thread is, because if you look, imposter thread, this is actually 2 pieces of imposter thread put together. Let's see here.
yeah.
2 together, so it is really small. And this with imposter thread on humid days, if you live like where I do in Illinois, it is impossible with humidity. It likes to bunch up, and there have been times it has taken me an entire day just to get enough loaded onto the maru-dye to work with. So it's not real friendly if you're in a humid place, but if you're like me and willing to fight for it, it makes a beautiful braid in the long run. And you can just, there's so much you can do with it. Things like this are often used even for hair ties, and even around belts, things like that. A lot of it, some of it originated even back in the samurai era, when they used Kumihimo to lace up their armor. And that was a big part of the history of Kumihimo, was samurai armor.
The flat braid does look a lot like the ties on my kendo armor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Last year I did, I entered my first A&S fair, and I did a Kumihimo project based on the armor. And that was quite fun to be able to research and just dig down into the history of what they used for the armor and how it was assembled with Kumihimo and all the different pieces. And I really enjoyed doing that project last year. Kumihimo means gathered threads even in Japanese. The term is very broad though, and it because it's so broad, it's very misleading looking at the history of it, because not a lot of the history has survived. It was handed down from the masters to the apprentices, who were sworn not to pass this information on. So once they passed away, a lot of the history of Kumihimo was lost forever. It was a very few special people who did carry it on. A lot of today's Kumihimo that we see now has been from just looking at braids that have survived and figuring out, okay, this goes this way, so that would be this move on the maru-dye. And it has, people like Makiko Tada has taken the time, another one is Roderick Owen, they've taken the time and sat down and actually recreated these braids, figured out how they would have been set up, and each and into every move that would have been made in order to create those. So there's been a lot of recreating the history of it just to find out how it was created to begin with. Unfortunately, like I said, it's been lost to time. It would be, great to be able to have even something written down on it of how it actually originally was done. But with Kumihimo, because it is so late in era, loop manipulation or loop braiding was its precursor. So if you want to go back, if you're a little bit further, loop braiding would have been what would have actually been used. The basis of Kumihimo would have just been starting in late era in Japan. The term of it does include, the term of Kumihimo does include finger loop braiding, and it's included under that broad definition of it all. So when you maybe look at Kumihimo, research it online, you won't necessarily find finger loop braiding. You'll have to search it itself just to find it, but it is part of Kumihimo as we know it today. Some of the earliest braids that have actually survived and have been discovered in tombs and even mosques and things like that have been dated to be around the Jomon period, which would be about 14,000 to about 3,000 BC. It was not really until the Asuka and Nara periods where the advanced techniques were being introduced, as Kumihimo being as a skill craft work. Otherwise, it was just, people who were doing it. In order to be a skilled craftsman, that came periods later. It is still considered, even today though, one of the most traditional of the Japanese arts. So that's why you'll see it through history even up to today. It's great that it's stuck around so long. I think that's just fabulous. And to see the reinsurgence in it today of people's interests just is amazing, to think that, it started back in history and now we're seeing it kind of take on its new era, even with things like the foam discs and, making it easy and accessible for people who want to try it. And it's kind of exciting to see a part of history just to restart itself. As time went on, braid patterns became more developed and were used more for headpieces for nobility, for religious ceremonies, tea ceremonies especially, is one place that you will see a lot of Kumihimo in it. The tea carts and the containers were often adorned with a braid. Could you imagine having a gorgeous tea cart and having it braided around it? I would love to be able to just do something like that, but that would be some work, I think, to be able to make that many pieces to go around a cart. But I think it would be a fun job to try. Then it was for armor, helmets, and even weapons during the samurai period. So it went from a lot of just basic, simple uses in like ceremonies and stuff to something that was saving people's lives, which I kind of find interesting, because then after that, then it shifted back again to ceremonial, but still remained very much useful when it started becoming ties for obajimis. So they had taken it from just useful pieces to very useful pieces, to being something that was of beauty and useful on even a daily basis for tying their clothing closed. Even though it is a broad term, one thing that remains consistent is that it represents the entire culture of braiding, which has continued through time. And you'll still even see some people wear kimonos, and they will have a braid tied around their obajimi or something adorning it somewhere. They were often used on fans, so a lot of times you'll see a fan adorning it. So it's just amazing how used it was and how different uses it was used for. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. So you demonstrated making a flat braid, is that correct?
Yes.
And what's the difference between creating a flat braid versus creating a round braid?
A flat braid is dependent on, usually most flat braids do have more moves to it. A round braid would be like the one that I was working on here, where I would just basically move my pieces up. Let's see if I can do this. Like from up here, and as you can see, when I end on my other braids, I always have 3 downward. That way I know exactly where I need to start again on braids like this. So I would have just one simple move in maybe one step on a round braid, where the flat braid, if you notice, some of the steps had 2 different sections. You would have to move, like in your first step, you would move 8 to 7, and then you would also move 24 to 23, which would open up slots for your next moves to go into. When you're doing a round braid, you don't necessarily have to open up a slot. You can just move it into that slot. And that's one of, there are many different steps, but that is one of the most basic steps that you will see in making a flat braid versus a round braid. Hope that answered your question. Does anyone else have any questions?
Wait, can I get that friend request sent back with a yes? Oh, you'll get chat request. Oh, baby, I'll know when you're on.
That's fine. That is absolutely fine. Like I said, I love to talk Kumihimo. I love to talk jewelry making in basic anyways. So I would love to chat with anybody who would like to. And if you would like to even learn more, or as I work on my next class, if you would like to maybe jump on into a Zoom chat and we can.
Yes, I was going to ask if you were doing more classes. Yes, 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 please.
Yes, I am working on, will be working, I haven't actually had the chance to start it yet. I will be working on using some of the different shaped discs and how you can make braids with those. The funny thing is you can make the flat braid on the round disc, but you can also make flat braids on the square discs. It's just, these are set up differently so that your moves are more this way instead of completely around your sections. But this will be one of the classes that I am working on next. And I'm just trying to, right now, I have found like 5 different braids that I'd like to focus on, but I know I need to narrow it down because otherwise we'll have, a 10-hour class. And I think that's a little bit long for everybody. So right now I'm trying to narrow it down to which one I actually think would be something that would be very usable, especially in the eras that the SCA are about, and something that people would enjoy making. Some of them can get very, very elaborate.
10 classes would be good. That would be fine.
Some of them I've even found a little frustrating because it's like, oh, good grief, now where does this step go to? The patterns for the square discs are not out there as much. So a lot of them are just pictures. So I'm having to go in and basically take these pictures and figure out, okay, here's the words that need to go with that move, and then write them down. And so that I can have even a handout for everybody. Otherwise, it's just a group of pictures, and some of them I've even looked at and said, okay, where do you start this braid? Which is one, you know, it's good if you have the experience, but if, you know, you're somebody who is just starting out and would like to jump in on a class, it could get frustrating. And I am one that when I teach classes, because I do have a teaching background, I don't want to just throw you right in the middle of it and lose you, and then you never return to that project, because then to me, I failed at teaching you Kumihimo. And if you stop to think, it's going to be people like you and I that are continuing on that history. But now we have the capability of writing it down so that we can continue to share it. So I work very hard when I plan my classes, make sure that it covers all skill levels for everybody. So that class is, for the square disc, is going to be in the works. It's just going to be a little further out. As I first, like I said, quit arguing with myself and choose which braid to do. But some of them would just, I think, are so beautiful that they would be fun to do. But then I also have to consider, okay, are they going to work with the appropriate materials? So, but it's a class in the works, and it will be out there. I will be offering it at some point. So just keep checking for that, or, you know, send me a message and say, hey, how are you coming on that class? And I'll let you know. And maybe if I'm not working on it, tell me, hey, you need to get to work on that. So by the way, this braid tonight, if anybody would like to look further into it, is called the Yatsu Seigumi braid. It is an 8-strand flat braid. You'll find braids that start out with 4, 8, move up to 16, 32, even 64 strands of whatever fibers you're using. And this one is kind of a middle strand with 8 strands, which is fairly easy to do. 64 is a lot of moves. I've seen some 64 strand patterns that have over 100 moves to them, but they are absolutely gorgeous braids. If you want to do a little research, though, it is the Yatsu Seigumi braid. Oh, Polly just was showing us the braid she was working on there.
Yeah, that's, I have been very complimented by a large order of peerage braids, and oh my gosh, I have a backlog. Oh my gosh.
They're fun though, aren't they?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Well, good. And I hope that for everybody that joined tonight, thank you for joining. And thank you for giving me the experience of being able to teach a rum class. I have been excited about that. If you are ever in Kingdom and head over to the way of Dark River, we're on the very edge of the Middle Kingdom. Stop in and say hi. I would love to be able to meet you, chat with you. And we have a great group of people who would also welcome you in. So if you ever get that chance, be sure to do that. I hope that I have been able to get you excited about Kumihimo. Included in your notes, like I said earlier, is a list of places that I purchase from. I don't endorse them, I just purchase from them. I have found that those are places that are really good price-wise, dependability-wise. They usually have everything in that I'm looking for. But if you find other places or know of other places that you'd purchase from, that's great too. Support, you know, all the different places. The more we support them, the more they will keep carrying the stuff so we can keep buying it. And if you are anything like me, you'll end up with more discs than you probably will know what to do with in a lifetime. But, you know, it's fun. And I hope that everybody has enjoyed tonight and you're excited. And be sure, even if it's on the Facebook event page, to take pictures of things you've created and share them. We'd all love to see them. So thank you for joining me tonight, and I hope everybody has had a good time.
Thank you so much, Isabella. It was an excellent class.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
was. I had done some Kumihimo probably 15 years ago and have a little Marodai, but got into other things, and now I'm going to go back to it this summer, and so I appreciate the jump start.
Well, good. I'm glad. And I'm glad to hear that you're getting back to it too.
Yeah, everybody out there, also remember that there are several people who are Skadian merchants who sell fiber. Look them up.
Mhm.
They need help because they sell at events. Their livelihoods are going.
Yes, yeah, it's true. And I've been looking at some of the fiber that some of them sell, and I'm narrowing down my list because it's a huge list, but I'm hoping to get some from them. I love the hand-dyed things that I've seen lately. So yes, definitely help everybody out and purchase what you can from them. I know there are some too, some merchants that even make maru dyes. So be sure to, you know, if you decide to take that step, check those out too as well.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm glad everybody had such a good time. Check our schedule for the next interesting class.